A very good afternoon to all the students of class 11. Today I'm going to take up the lesson Discovering Tut. The saga continues, written by A.R. Williams. Now, as the title suggests, Discovering Tut. Now, Tut was a very famous Egyptian pharaoh. Pharaoh, that is an Egyptian king. And his tomb was discovered after many, many years of his burial. And Tut's history dates back to 3,300 years, So it was a great discovery which was made. And the second part of the title, the saga continues, means the story continues. That the process of, finding various facts and investigation that is still going on. Now, A.R. Williams, that is Anne Williams, is a former senior writer for the National Geographic magazine and online news, and she specializes in archaeology. So this is also an article which is taken from the National Geographic magazine. Okay, now this lesson transforms us to Egypt, which is the land of mummies, and Egypt, as we know, is the gift of the Nile, because if River Nile had not been there, Egypt would have been a vast desert. And Egypt is also known for other things, and especially its pyramids. And it is famous for its pyramids, and two pyramids are very, very famous. One is at Giza, and that is the Great Sphinx, which is supposed to be a mythical creature. And it has the head of a man and the body of a lion. And the other one is the Pyramid of Khufu, which is supposed to be the largest pyramid. Now, these pyramids are masonry structures in the shape of a pyramid. Okay, so now we proceed towards the chapter, and it is very, very interesting from the point of view that history, of course, is there in the chapter. It's a historical data that we gather about King Tut and various other kings. But more important than that is that how literature, English, and science, has come together. So this chapter that is there as your literature text, it gives us vast information, and it highlights that how science, because over the years science has evolved a great deal and there have been great inventions. So how science has helped the archaeologists, and it has helped the historians, to get facts and data, and which has enhanced, everybody's knowledge. Okay, so here we come to know that the background of the chapter is about King Tut, whose full name was actually Tutankhamun, and he became a ruler at a very young age. So he was a teenage ruler. And but unfortunately, his rule was very, very short. He just ruled for about 9 years, that is from 1334 BC to 1325 BC. Though his rule was very short, but he gave his subjects, a golden period, and various things that had been done away with by his predecessor. Predecessor is the ruler before him. So many things had changed, had been changed by his predecessor, but he discontinued with that, and he restored the lost glory of this dynasty. So we come to know what all, was happening in their reign at that point of time. And science has evolved. Like earlier on, we had X-rays, then we came on to CT scans, and then after that it has come on to MRI. So we are advancing with the passage of time, and it is making things easier for mankind. Okay, so if we just talk about the lesson, it is an interesting account of a great discovery, okay, which was made by Howard Carter, a British archaeologist, in 1922. For many years, this archaeologist had been trying to locate or discover the tomb of King Tut. But after a long, futile effort, finally he did see success, and he discovered this tomb in 1922. And with that came many other archaeological discoveries and researches. Now, it took almost 6 years for Carter to finish with the excavation, and to reach the body, and then since it had to be scanned, so to bring out the body from the coffin, from the tomb for a CT scan, it was a Herculean task, a very big task, because when the tomb was opened up, and they did find the coffin and bearing his body and things like that, but there was a major problem that came in their way, and the problem was that since these Egyptians believed in life after death, so when these pharaohs were buried, they were buried with a whole lot of things, which they needed and which they actually used in their daily lives. All that was buried with them. So it was not only the small things, but it was also, the huge things that were there. Because when the excavation was carried out, actually, they say that the treasure that was found, it was laid out in 5 rooms, and it also included thrones and statues and furniture and arms, besides the things, of course, the personal adornments of the king, like the rings, bracelets, amulets. Amulets are a kind of a charm that is worn, to ward away any kind of fear or evil or danger or disease, so it's like a charm. So, and the aprons and their mask, so all these were buried along with the pharaohs. So it was a Herculean task, because the body of King Tut was actually cemented or stuck to the base of the coffin. Why? Because in those days they used to use these ritual raisins, raisins like kishmish that we talk about. So ritual raisins were used when they buried the body. So the whole body was caked with, those raisins. Now, with the passage of time, these raisins must have melted and things. So the body basically got stuck to the base of the coffin. It got cemented. And no amount of force could pull that body out of that coffin. Carter tried his level best to place that coffin in the blazing, scorching heat of the sun, and where the temperature rose to about 149 degrees Fahrenheit. But it proved to be futile, because that glued part, the raisins that were there stuck, nothing melted, or the body did not loosen at all. So that was a big hurdle in his discovery. So ultimately what he had to do was, he actually had to use a chisel. Now chisel, Hindi mein hum use kehte hain chheni, and carpenters use it, when they have to chip off, or, certain portions of the wood that they are using. So they use a chisel and then they hammer it, to chip it off. So similarly, Carter also had to use a chisel to remove the body from the base of the coffin. Now, in doing this, the body was damaged to quite an extent, and because the head portion had to be cut off, and the major joints of the body had to be severed, severed, cut off, to get the body out. Because in those days, the body had to be carried to the machine. Now, today, science has given us portable machines where you can carry the machine to the patient, or, to wherever it's required. But in those days, it was not like this. So the body had to be carried to the machine. So how could they carry the body, and how could it be scanned if it was not separated from the base of the coffin? So as a result, Zahi Hawas, another person who's been mentioned here, who was the Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities. He was very disturbed, because, these are antique things, and no damage should come to these things. So he got very worried, and most of the people also resented Carter's, way of dealing with the mummy. But since Carter had no other choice but to do this, in order to get the mummy out and take it for a CT scan. So that was why his investigation, or his, whole process was resented. Now, then after that, the chapter actually begins on a very spooky and a eerie note, very mysterious. Suddenly, because, they were dealing with the dead, the pharaohs, and there was a belief or a superstition that, if anybody interfered or touched these mummies or opened up the tombs or disturbed their eternal sleep, they would be, cursed. And what was the curse? That, death or ill luck would fall upon these people who actually indulged in these acts. So there was apprehension also. So the writer has, tried to arouse the interest and has created that kind of an atmosphere. So when the day the scanning had to be done, there were strong winds began to blow, and the dust particles and the dust outside and the sand, it began to swirl, go around, and it was flying in all directions, and creating images like ghosts or devils, so that kind of a thing. And then dark gray clouds began to assemble in the sky. So a little bit of a spooky environment has been created, and huge bulging clouds, dark bellied clouds, they scudded across the desert, sailed across the desert. And the writer has very beautifully used the word that the clouds were veiling the stars. Veiling means hiding, concealing, just as women wear a veil, to cover their faces. So here the clouds were concealing the stars in casket gray. Now, casket gray, the comparison that the writer has beautifully brought out is, a casket is supposed to be a box, and like, for example, if we take a jewelry box, it's an ornamental box, and in which jewels are kept, okay? And these jewels, when you open the box, the jewels are shining and glistening. So the writer also has tried to compare, the sky to a casket, a box, and the twinkling stars, they were shining and they were twinkling like these jewels in a casket. So it's been beautifully written. Okay, so then it was about 6 p.m., on 5th January 2005, that the world's most famous mummy was glided headfirst into the CT scanner, which was brought there to probe the lingering mysteries, the mysteries that had been working on everybody's mind, and how he must have died, what must have happened, because in the political, in these palaces and all, there's a lot of treachery and, intriguing that goes on. So the belief was that maybe he was murdered by somebody. So then all these facts would be discovered after the CT scan, and why the ruler had died at such a young age. Now, when all this was happening, this was a very famous place, a historical place. So there were lots of tourists also there, and they had also descended, so it was underground, the body and everything. So everybody had descended into the cramped as there was very little room for everybody to stand, because it was a rock cut tomb. From a single rock, a tomb or a burial chamber had been created in this rock. Just as in history, you must have done rock-cut temples, how a rock is cut and, made into a temple. So this rock-cut tomb, and it was 26 feet underground. So all these people had gathered. Some must have come only out of curiosity. Some must have come to pay their respects to King Tut. And some were reading the literature that had been given by the guide. Some were talking amongst themselves. Some were just standing silently, maybe contemplating about the king and his times, and, reflecting on various things, okay? And pondering about his untimely death and what could be the reason, and some were whispering. So there were lots of people, and there was a little bit of fear and apprehension, because they had heard about this curse and, about this superstition. So maybe they were a little apprehensive also. Okay, then what happened? Then when the body was put into this scanner, okay, so, and the CT scanner actually, it makes a virtual image of the body. And from every angle, the scanning was done, and 1,700 digital X-ray images in cross-section were made, and his head was scanned in various positions, and to actually go into the details of the intricate structure and to find out the minutest details which they wanted. So all the people who were involved in that process, there was a team of specialists in radiology, all those were linked with the X-rays and CT scanning and MRIs, and the forensics. Now, forensic, you're very familiar with this word, and we know that when there's crime, the forensic people are immediately called for, and they look around for footprints and various other clues that they have to find. Now here, in archaeology also, you have forensic archaeologists, and they are employed, to excavate and recover human remains or their personal items and weapons, etc. So all these people had gathered over there. And anatomy is the study of the body. It began to probe all the secrets. Okay, so while the body was being taken out, all the people were around. Then the workmen carried Tuts' mummified body out from the tomb, and like pallbearers, coffin carriers, they climbed the ramp, then they climbed a flight of stairs, and they came across swirling sand outside, and then they lifted the body on a hydraulic lift and into the trailer where the scanner was. Okay. But after about 20 minutes, two people came sprinting, running at a great speed, so the $1 million scanner, which had been given by the geographic people and all, it had stopped working. And so as a result, they had to look for a substitute, and so they brought in two plastic fans. But fortunately, these plastic fans worked commendably. And after checking that nothing was left out and no data was missing, Tut was handed back to the workmen, and they carried him back to the tomb. So in less than 3 hours, after removing him from the coffin, the pharaoh again came to rest in peace, where once 3,300 years ago, the funerary priests had laid him to eternal sleep. Now, at this point of time, Zahi Hawas, heaved a sigh of relief, because he was very, very worried about the body. So, later on, after the body was, cut into pieces, and then, later on, then they assembled it together. They padded the whole thing, and they assembled the body together, and with that padding, all that damage was hidden. And finally, Tut came back to his tomb safely. Now, actually, when the tomb was discovered, it was considered to be a great discovery, because at that point of time, these Egyptian pharaohs, they are supposed to be very wealthy, fabulously rich. And when they buried the body, as I told you, they buried a lot of gold and a lot of ornaments and many adornments. So we can say that the tomb was very, very rich. So any, thieves or robbers could have, opened up the tomb and would have stolen all those important artifacts and all the, the priceless gold that was there, so much. So in order to, so this discovery saved all these adornments and all the gold that was there in Tut's tomb. Okay, so that was a great relief at that point of time. And as it is, because he was a king, and he was the way he lived, and he gave a prosperous environment and rule to his subjects, to his kingdom. So his burial was also done by very royal standards, okay. And after his death, actually this dynasty came to an end. Now, when the here I would like to tell you that they have mentioned that when Tut's body was buried, actually there used to be 3 nested coffins, and here the outermost container or that coffin, it was made out of stone, and the name given to that stone container is sarcophagus, Sarcophagus. It was called a sarcophagus, and it usually had an inscription on top or some sculpture on top, and this container was kept only on the ground level. This was not buried, okay? And later on, then you had another container with various adornments and things, and of course one containing the body of the person. Now when they opened up these coffins, they found a shroud. Shroud is basically a coffin, a piece of cloth in which the dead body is wrapped. So they found this shroud adorned with garlands of willow and olive leaves, wild celery. Celery is a plant, it's a marshland plant, and it has long stalks and leaves on top. Then lotus petals and cornflowers. And the writer has said that the faded evidence, all these things, all these plants and all these leaves and flowers must have been used at that time because they were available at that particular time. So whatever is there, you use that. So that gives us the evidence that Tut must have been buried in the month of March or April, because when we find that kind of vegetation. And faded evidence means, now over the years, so many years had gone by, so obviously all these leaves and flowers and everything, they must have wilted and they must have, shriveled up, and they were all faded. But still there was evidence enough to show that maybe he was buried in the month of March or April, okay? Yes, that is that. Then after that, we come on to the lineage that they have given over here. Lineage is the line of kings, So we have mentioned in this particular chapter that Amenhotep III, but it's not very sure whether he was Tut's father or he was Tut's grandfather. He was a powerful pharaoh, and he gave his subjects and a glorious, a golden period, and he ruled for almost 4 decades. 4 decades means almost 40 years, and this was the dynasty's golden age. Then he was succeeded by his son Amenhotep IV, but his period is considered to be one of the strangest periods in the history of ancient Egypt. Now, before he came to the throne, Amun was the god that was worshipped, and everybody worshipped Amun, okay? And but this particular king, Amenhotep IV, he did away with that, and he began the worship of the deity, that is Aten, the sun disk, and he changed his name to Akanathan, okay, or the servant of the Aten. And he moved the religious capital from the old city of Thebes to a new city known as Amarna. But he did not stop there. He went further with his destructive activities, and he shocked the country by attacking Amun the god and smashing all the images, desecrating them, and closing those temples. So this was very, very shocking for the people of that time. And that is why Ray Johnson, the director of the University of Chicago's Research Center at Luxor, called him wacky. That means he was very strange. He was, very odd in his ways. So now after that, after Akanathan's death, after the strange period, there came another ruler, a mysterious ruler, who was named Sumankari. But he was, there's nothing written about him because maybe he never carried out something that was very great or something. So he was a mysterious ruler and he appeared briefly, and he made his exit also without any specific achievement. And after Sumankari came this teenage king, and now he reversed all that was done by Akanathan, and he began the worship of Amun, the sun god, once again, and he named himself Tutankhamun, which means the living image of Amun, the god. That means the representative of that god on earth. And he restored all the old ways, and he, brought back the lost glory. But the sad part was that he only reigned for about 9 years, and then he died unexpectedly. Okay. But here we can see that just as he made a great name for himself while he was alive, even after his death, he made a great name because he was the first mummy to be scanned in death as if in life. Usually we take people who are alive for scans, but he was the first mummy, the first dead person to be scanned. And that is why, he moved ahead regally in a royal manner ahead of his countrymen. Okay, ahead of his countrymen. So here we can see that Tut made a name for himself here also. Now after, the chapter, after he's brought back to the tomb and the technicians and everybody moves back, and, then when they come towards the tomb, here they see a constellation, a constellation of Orion, okay, the constellation of the ancient Egyptians, who is supposed to be the soul of Osiris, okay, and Osiris is the god of the afterlife and watching over the boy king, protecting it and looking after it. But thankfully, the mummified body was once again resting in its tomb in a very safe manner. Now here we see that, the tomb was discovered in 1922. And after about more than 40 years, before a CT scan, his body was X-rayed, in 1968. So before a CT scan, the mummified body of King Tut had gone through an X-ray, and in 1968, and the X-ray revealed that King Tut's breastbone and his front ribs were missing. So that is why, we can say that his body was subjected to scans various times. So in 1968, nearly 40 years after his tomb was discovered, he was X-rayed, and then in 2005, a CT scan was carried out. Okay, so that is that. Now here we can see with the evolution of science, as I was saying, that it has really helped mankind in various ways. Now, from this lesson, we can say, we can bring about a change in the process of archaeology. So, the archaeology now and the archaeology then, in the past. So, it is said that in the past, a scientific study of human antiquities, okay, all the material goods and objects was there. Now, it is an investigative and scientific study of human antiquities. Investigative has been added. Today's archaeology focuses on mysteries of life and death instead of the treasures that are found. Then with science, we are using modern tools, and medical technology has become a part of the investigation. Okay, so like as I told you, with the X-ray, it was revealed that his breastbone and his front ribs were missing. But still, there are various questions were left unanswered. How did Tut die? and what was his age exactly when he died. Okay. Then another thing that this lesson talks about is a very important thing, why this lesson has taken up and what all has been taken up about these mummified bodies. So this was the Egyptian project which began an inventory. Inventory is making a list, in late 2003, and it was engaged in the task of recording mummies. It had recorded almost 600, and the counting is still going on. Okay, and this project is basically an interdisciplinary project, and it combines physical anthropology, Egyptology, digital imaging, scientific illustration, and conservation to investigate Egyptian mummies and go into details about all the funerary treasures. So science and archaeology, they work together to help us better understand the past and the glories of the ancient civilization. And Tut was one of the most famous mummies. Okay. Okay. Well, I think we have covered most of the details of the chapter. Now we can go on to the the question and answers. Give reasons for the following. King Tut's body has been subjected to repeated scrutiny. The tomb of King Tut was discovered in 1922 by the British archaeologist Howard Carter. Tut's tomb, was a great achievement. And in order to investigate the contents of the tomb, the body had to be cut open and, taken out from the coffin in order to get a scanning done. And before that, in 1968 also, King Tut's body had been X-rayed, and it was found that his breastbone and front ribs were missing. So that is why it is said that he was subjected to so much scrutiny. Okay. Now, who was Howard Carter, and why was his investigation resented? Now, Howard Carter was a British archaeologist who discovered the tomb of King Tut in 1922, and his investigation was resented because when they opened up the tomb and they wanted to, bring out the mummified body of King Tut for a scanning, they realized that the body was actually stuck to the base of the coffin. It had got cemented because of the ritual raisins that had been used at the time of the funeral. So as a result, the archaeologist had to use a chisel, to extract the body, and also had to cut it, the head part had to be cut off and the major joints had to be cut. So the body was actually, in a bad shape. So that is why the people resented it. Okay, next question. The boy king changed his name from the boy changed his name to Tutankhamun. Why? The boy king changed his name to Tutankhamun, which meant the living image of god Amun, a major god. His predecessor, Amenhotep IV, had smashed the images of the god Amun and closed his temples. And, as he wanted to promote the worship of Aten, another god. So he wanted to end this chapter of hatred towards Amun, and that is why he changed his name to reassure people that he wanted to restore the old ways of worship. Okay. Next question. List the deeds that led Ray Johnson to describe Akanathan as wacky or odd or strange. Now, Ray Johnson rightly described Akanathan, King Tut's predecessor, as crazy. His new name, Akanathan, meant the servant of Aten, the sun disk. He wanted to promote the worship of Aten, and that is why he shocked the people by smashing the images of Amun, a major god, and closed all those temples. And then another crazy move was when he shifted his religious capital from the old city of Thebes to a new city named Amarna. Okay. What caused so much interest about Tut's mummy? Now, King Tut, it was found he was the last heir of a powerful dynasty of the rulers in ancient Egypt. And he died young in mysterious circumstances. And the discovery of his mummy arose the interest among the people as to how he had died. And they wanted to know more about his death. Okay. What did the tourists do? The tourists from far and near, they had come there to visit this place, and some must have come there also to pay their respects. And they looked, some looked at the walls, you know, which had the murals, the wall paintings, which must have interested them. And some looked at the gilded, you know, gilded is with a covering of gold, you know, jaise sone ka pani chada hua, that's what we say. So some looked at the gilded face of King Tut, and some of them read the guidebooks or the literature given by the guides. Some just stood silently, and some, you know, maybe they were apprehensive about the Pharaoh's curse. Now, what were the results of the CT scan? Now, the mummy was examined or scanned from head to toe. 1700 digital images, digital X-ray images were taken, and the head was scanned in 0.62 millimeter slices to probe the secrets of his death. These images finally established that nothing, you know, had seriously gone wrong, and King Tut's death was natural. Okay. List the advances in technology that have improved forensic analysis. Okay. Just as I told you that we have really gone a long way. From X-rays, we have come on to CT scans, and from CT scans today, we have come on to MRIs. Okay. So there has been a great improvement which has helped everybody. Okay. What was the Pharaoh's curse? Did it prove to be ominous? Ominous is an omen, bad omen, good omen. Okay. So it was generally believed that the Pharaoh's curse, that misfortune or death would befall upon all those who would disturb his eternal sleep. So it was thought to be ominous on, the 5th of January 2005, when Tut's body was being taken out for its CT scan, when, you know, strong winds began to blow, and there was, ghostly, the dust was forming ghostly images, and, dark grey clouds gathered in the sky. So everything was very, very spooky and eerie, okay? So that is why it seemed to be ominous. What do the funerary treasures tell us about the beliefs of ancient Egyptians? Now, the funerary treasures in Tut's tomb included numerous artifacts. Now, what are artifacts? Artifacts are objects made by human beings, typically one of cultural or historical interest. For example, tools, then coins and weapons and pottery and jewelry, etc. Okay, so the artifacts that were there in gold, then things of daily use like oil, food, wine, clothes, board games, and they tell us that people in ancient Egypt actually believed in life after death, and they felt that they could carry their riches along with them, and because they believed in life after death, they felt that they might need all those things that they use in their daily lives. Even afterwards, they would need them. Okay. All right. Now here, actually, I read somewhere which I could share with you. The board games. The board games. Some of the names were Mehen, Senet, then 20 squares, and hounds and jackals, which were closely associated and played with on opposite sides of the same board. And, the game pieces, they were either stones or they were ankle bones of sheep, with which they played. Okay, so I think most of the question and answers I have done with you. Now, in your book, they have given, certain abbreviations, which I thought I would do with you in your textbook. CT scan. Now, the full form is computed tomography. Computed tomography. Then MRI. It stands for magnetic resonance imaging. And in this method, a strong magnetic field to produce an image of the inside of a person's body. And tomography is actually a radiography of a layer in the body by moving the X-ray tube and photoplate in such a way that only the chosen plane appears in clear detail. Then we have autopsy. It is an examination of the dead body. Dialysis is the removal of impurities from the blood by a kidney machine. ECG, electrocardiogram. It's a medical test that measures and records electrical activity of the heart. Post-mortem, it's a medical examination of a dead person body in order to find out how he or she died. Then we have angiography. It's a medical process for repairing or opening a blocked blood vessel. Then biopsy. It is the removal and examination of a tissue from a sick person to find out more information about the disease. So I think I have covered everything, and I hope that you'll be able to comprehend. Thank you very much for watching and listening. God bless you all.